This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for September 3rd, 9 a.m. Here's the floater loop on Hurricane Earl from NOAA, and you can see that the system is weakening, continues weakening as it moves off to the northeast, a very disorganized system compared to what it was 24 hours ago. And in fact, last night is when the system really started to weaken as dry air was being pulled into the south quadrant of the hurricane and was weakening the eye wall, and that process continues. Here's some wind reports that we've gotten from the HurTrack program. And first of all, let me say right now that the worst conditions that have been felt so far with Hurricane Earl have been down in the British Virgin Islands and as well as St. Martin down in the northeastern Antilles. These have been the hardest hit areas by Earl so far because Earl may have had direct impacts of the southern eye wall in those areas. But St. John's Virgin Island had maximum sustained winds of 56 knots and gusts to 71 knots, and that was on Monday, August 30th. And St. Thomas was pretty close to that. They had gusts to 56, sustained 56 gusts to 70 knots. Now here's North Carolina, Dare County, 55 knot gusts. Sustained winds of 55 knots, gusting to 68 knots. So they did get some gust to hurricane force, but most of the hurricane force winds remained offshore. Hyde County, North Carolina, sustained winds 51 knots, gusting to 64. Currituck County, 49, gusting to 61, and it goes down from there. Up in Virginia Beach, for example, they only had a gust of 44 knots up in that area, and that was earlier this morning around 8 o'clock, and that's about the worst it's going to get for the mid-Atlantic coast. So this system heads up to the northeast, and we're going to be monitoring this as it approaches Cape Cod, Nova Scotia. Now here are the Hurricane Hunter fixes from the past several hours. And let's go back to yesterday. We're going back 14 hours. And this was the position when it was well south-southeast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, and we had a pressure 949 millibars. Next fix 951. Next fix 953, 955, and now this morning we're up to 960 millibars. As this continues to weaken, the higher the millibars are, the weaker the system is. And we have maximum surface information at 65 knots. That's a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane. So I would imagine probably at the 11 a.m. advisory that they will downgrade this to a Category 1. It wouldn't surprise me as this continues to weaken. All right, we have Mark out there, hurricanetrack.com. He's got his cam out there in the Outer Banks. We've been monitoring that throughout the night, on and off, but there it is, so some wind and rain. It was pretty gusty there about a half an hour ago. There's a pretty good squall line that came through there. And he's in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, parked out there. Mark always goes and intercepts these, and we interact with Mark on the hurricane warning shows. We did not do a hurricane warning show for this because it was not making landfall as a hurricane. So we only do that for landfalling hurricanes. In fact, our schedule for the Cape Cod broadcast is probably not a go at this time. It looks like the hurricane force wind should remain offshore the Cape Cod area, but that's still skeptical at this time. They're still indicating that could be. I'll show you some graphics in just a minute on that, but we'll have to make a call on that later on this evening. All right, let's get to some graphics. First of all, here's our advisories from the National Hurricane Center. The red areas indicate hurricane warnings, and that stretches up pretty close to Boston and all the way down just east of Rhode Island. And then in Rhode Island, we have tropical storm warning all the way over to New Bedford, Massachusetts, and half of Long Island here, the eastern half of Long Island, tropical storm warning and tropical storm watch for the western half of Long Island. So this is going to be a non-story for these areas. It's the outer areas out here in the Cape Cod and especially Nantucket Island out here is going to probably get the worst of this as it passes by. Now here was what the forecast we're calling for yesterday. This is yesterday's forecast from the National Hurricane Center, indicating that the red circle here, hurricane force winds, would touch Cape Cod and basically affect all of Nantucket Island out here, and then the rest area would have sustained tropical storm force winds. Well, let's see what it's calling for today. basically the same thing, maybe just a little bit further offshore Cape Cod. And that's why I say Cape Cod might not get under these hurricane force winds, because not only do we have a weakening hurricane, but we have a system that's basically slowly becoming a extratropical system. And when that happens, you can pretty much cancel out the hurricane force wind field, and the tropical storm force wind field expands. And that's what we're forecast. That's what the National Hurricane Center is forecasting. The hurricane force winds will affect Nantucket, but probably not Cape Cod. And that's another reason why we're probably not going to be doing a hurricane warning show tonight on this system. Now here's yesterday's forecast for Nova Scotia. Extratropical storm moving in on the western tip of Nova Scotia. And what does it call for today? Basically the same thing. Nothing's changed for the forecast of Nova Scotia. Basically a hurricane winding down to an extratropical storm hitting the western areas of Nova Scotia, and they should just have sustained tropical storm force winds up that way. Now, back in history, what storms have been in this exact same position, and where did they go? Hurricane Edna back in 1954, almost the same circumstances here. Hurricane Edna traveled like this and hit Cape Cod as a Category 1 hurricane with winds around 90 miles an hour, and then it went up into Maine and New Brunswick here. However, we're expecting this system to take a little bit more of an easterly track. I'll show you the forecast in just the models in just a minute. Hurricane Ivan back in 2004 came through Florida and became like an extratropical storm out here before moving inland in Virginia. And that was also in this position right around this day back on September 2nd to September 4th. We use a 3-day period of history here to see what storms were in the same exact position around this same time of the year. All right, here are all the models tightly clustered using the HurTrack program, and you can see they all remain pretty much offshore of Cape Cod, which is good news. And then, of course, it comes into Nova Scotia as an extratropical storm, so it's really been a good, well-behaved hurricane for the most part. It came a little bit closer than we thought to the United States, but the good news is nobody had to deal with any sustained hurricane force winds. At least it looks like that's what's going to happen here. With the exception, here is the zoomed-in model map at Hurricane City, and the best performing model as far as track on this system as of now has been the EGRR, which is the UK Met model. And if we follow the UK Met, it has this very close, if not over the Nantucket Island area here, as it goes into New Brunswick and up like this. So that's been off by roughly 200 miles at about 7 days out. So the UK Met has this very close to Cape Cod in about 24, later on tonight. So we'll have to see if that plays out. But again, I think this is going to be a much weaker system. It could actually be transitioning to extratropical. We'll have to see about that. But the UK Met, keep an eye on that model. That's taking it very close to Cape Cod tonight. All right, let's take a look at the water vapor loop here of the Atlantic Basin and take a look at what else is happening out there. Here's Hurricane Earl cruising off to the northeast. And another thing, looking at that close-up floater loop, it looks like the system's moving more to the northeast now, which could be lessen the effects for Cape Cod. We'll have to see if that trend continues. Here's our scoop back here that's been shoving this thing into the northeast. Here's Fiona. Fiona got caught up in the outflow of Hurricane Earl. It still remains a tropical storm, and there's a tropical storm warning out actually for Bermuda, but it's a weakening tropical storm, and this is going to just wash out up here just north of Bermuda. And then we still have Gaston out here, and that system is still intact, and this could regenerate. In fact, the GFS model indicates this is going to move through the Windward and Leeward Islands, head up towards Puerto Rico and Hispaniola here in about 5 days. So this is something we're going to have to watch. You can't write Gaston off. I know they stopped writing advisories on it, but that's why we left the advisory box up at Hurricane City, because this could regenerate within a few days. And we also have another wave off the coast of Africa that we're going to have to watch closely. That's a large tropical wave. So that's it for now. We'll have another update tomorrow on this situation, or later tonight, depending on the situation. But as of now, there are no plans to do a hurricane warning archive show for Hurricane Earl. We'll watch it closely as it approaches Cape Cod, see what kind of conditions we're going to get up there. And we're going to leave up the Hurricane Watch Net for the most of the day, and updated audio advisories from the National Hurricane Center and assorted graphics. And we'll watch Mark Sutter to see how he's doing over there in the Outer Banks. And that's about it. We'll monitor some cams up in the Northeast, put out at hurricanecity.tv. That's it for now. Check out hurricanecity.com for the latest, and thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.